Children, have you ever met the bogeyman before? No, of course you haven't, for you're much too good, I'm sure. Don't you be afraid of him if he should visit you. He's a great big coward, so I'll tell you what to do. Hush, 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 here comes the bogeyman.
Hi, I'm Richard Eriksson, and this is whatever the hell I'm going to end up calling this show. If you wonder why I'm doing this through web camera, then it's because Movie Maker doesn't appear to like these. So anyway, as this is the first time I attempt to do a review, I will start up with something fairly easy. Messenger 2, Scarecrow. I picked up this one not because I've seen the original, but because the cover looked interesting, so not much to say there really. So let's see if it's any good. So the movie begins with a generic kill of a blonde woman. Good to know what kind of movie this is from the opening kill. So the story is actually about the Rollins family who makes their living as corn farmers and have hit upon some hard times. By the time the story starts, they're behind on their payments, can't afford supplies to run the farm, and are threatened by foreclosure by the bank. After this has been established, we jump to him seeing his crops being eaten by crows, and he rushes to get the scythe, but accidentally tears down the entire shelf, revealing a hidden door in which he finds the titular scarecrow. I have to admit, I rather like the design. It is simple and restrained, but at the same time it still looks sinister. As he gets ready to put it up, his son comes in and says what the audience is thinking.
It's bad, Daddy.
On the other hand, what else is he supposed to do to keep the crows away? He promises his son not to put it up and goes to collect some crops. However, as he returns, he sees that the scarecrow is moving.
Jesus Christ!
Turns out it was just his wife giving the scarecrow a blowjob. Dear God.
Since when do you use his name in vain?
However, as the night sets in and they all go to bed, the door to the farmhouse opens and lets the crows in for a feast. This, unsurprisingly, makes John even more desperate than before, and as he tries to save every bit of corn he possibly can, his new neighbor Jude shows up and offers him a six-pack of beer and tells him that it would be wise to put up the scarecrow. John realizes that this is the smart thing to do and puts up the scarecrow. However, as he finishes putting it up, he hears the laughter of a child, which in horror movies is the alarm for mindfuck incoming. As he sits down after a day of nothing but disappointment, his wife comes along to cheer him up, and I have to say that whereas many horror movies manages to render relationships between characters either pointless or unconvincing, this conversation is actually quite good at establishing his own doubts about his ability to support the family, and if it maybe hadn't been better if she would have married someone else, to which she assures him that she is happy with him and would never change her life with him. And of course, this leads into them having sex. As he wakes up the next day, he finds that all the crows are lying dead on the ground.
The power of love. That's the power of love.
As he now collects the dead crows with no questions as to how they all just suddenly died without explanation, a banker arrives to say that unless he either sells the farm or pays the bank, he'll foreclose. Like John, he doesn't question the sea of dead crows either. Is this a common thing in the US? As the banker leaves, we see John walking into the field and happening upon the woman from the opening. Ghost! No, seriously, how can you think anything else after we saw her die in the opening? She then proceeds to pour water over herself and strip naked in front of him. Now aroused from having watched the woman perform this out of nowhere act, he runs back home and tries to convince his wife to have sex with him. I have issues with the following scene. While it isn't graphic, nor long, it is essentially him forcing himself onto his wife. I know it's trying to establish that he's losing his mind, but I'm not sure it was necessary to convey that. Later on that same night, we see the banker trying to set up foreclosure signs around the Rollins land. He walks off to take a piss. However, he soon realizes that someone doesn't take kindly to people pissing on his work. The banker escapes, but he ends up in the middle of the road and gets hit by a truck. Naturally, the police takes notice and visits John with some routine questions. However, once they leave, the couple gets into an argument over whether they should console the grieving family or not. Norman Reedus actually does a very good job playing John, as he goes from a kind family father to become a far colder individual as the movie goes on, only to return back to being a hero in the end. He finds some money sprinkled throughout the field, however he becomes very hesitant once he finds the banker's watch. Through the power of Mind Screw, he ends up at Jude's place, who convinces him to keep the watch.
John, a smart man would consider it good fortune or karma or whatever you want.
Jude is such a subtle character. But he isn't entirely wrong either, because as we've seen throughout the movie, John's family is having severe difficulties in making ends meet, and for as immoral it might be considered to take a dead man's watch, what is a father supposed to do in such a situation? As yet another day comes to an end, he hears his wife talking to someone. This turns out to be an old friend of theirs named Tom. He used to have a crush on Mary and is now listening to her story.
I can't say for sure, but I probably would have reacted the same way he did.
This of course makes him a little bit suspicious, but at the same time he does promise his wife that they will see a couples counselor.
Really?
However, that same night he falls asleep on the porch and has a nightmare that is rather lame. It's just him finding a tooth in the corn and then seeing a demon disguised as his son. Oh yes, and this. Silly John. You look like it's the first time you see yourself being crucified. As he wakes up, he discovers that there are both good and bad news. The good news are that his crops has grown over the night, and the bad news are...
It's Tommy. He's dead.
And just as with the banker's watch, he also finds Tom's ring out in the field. Not being a complete idiot, he goes to take down the scarecrow. However, he ends up with a large splinter in his hand, so he runs back to the house to get it out, and encounters the police. However, no suspicions are raised as of yet, so this scene only serves to lead into this.
Well, I'm sorry. But what if you told somebody? You know how this town gossips, and I didn't want you holding a dead man's ring in your hand.
A. The town gossiping, that was established earlier on in the movie. B. We've seen their relationship being built up gradually throughout the course of the movie, so this comes off as natural rather than contrived. He returns out into the field only to become what I can only describe as, high. Dude. And he has yet another hallucination. After screwing around some more, he goes out to cut down the scarecrow and then burns it. However, it turns out he missed their couples counseling.
I've tried, John. I really have.
He goes to visit Jude for some advice, but instead finds his wife. She then invites him in for a cup of tea and soon makes her advances on him. However, he refuses and she rapes him? No comment. Seriously, this just comes out of nowhere and never comes back again. What the hell am I supposed to say about it? After having been raped, he goes back to the house, but on his way he sees that the scarecrow is still there. And once he gets back, his daughter says this.
Tell me this, was it worth it?
Was what worth it?
Putting your precious cornfield before your family.
Those cornfields are also your only income. Stepping into the house, he notices that his wife is pissed, and for pretty good reasons, let's face it, and thinks he's been with another woman, which she technically has. It's nice to see that she's having a fairly natural reaction and that she's not blowing this completely out of proportion. His wife not being exactly happy with him, he goes out to the barn, but he encounters Jude, who says this.
I need to see my wife.
This won't be awkward at all.
My wife, Miranda? She knows stuff, John. Stuff what ain't exactly Christian, if you get my meaning.
She's an astrophysicist? Turns out that she's actually a witch and that the scarecrow is her creation. She hands him the manual that she used to create it and says that the scarecrow is actually doing good and that he needs to get rid of his family because they're a distraction. He, however, doesn't quite see it that way. She also says that the owner of the scarecrow must have a focused mind or the scarecrow won't operate properly, which raises a few questions. You know, if the scarecrow is controlled by his mind, then wouldn't he just be able to, make it not kill his family? Or maybe it's actually under the control of Jack Nicholson. As he rushes back to the house, I can't help but ponder one thing. Why does he always go through the field? It's only brought him hallucinations thus far, and you'd think he'd make it back faster without those. Anyway, as he gets back to the house, he sees that the police has shown up and is now accusing him of the murders. He convinces him to follow him into the barn so he can explain things, but that doesn't exactly go well.
Just leave him. The fool is safe.
Also, what kind of police officer goes into a small dark room with the murder suspect? Worst police officer ever! Jude tells John once more to put his crops ahead of his family, and John's wife shows up. He tells her that he was talking to Jude and Miranda, but she doesn't believe him because, well, there's no one there. He tries to give her the book that Miranda gave him, but she points out that it's only his own Bible. Bible, manual how to create demonically possessed scarecrows. Same thing, really. Spotting the dead cop, she naturally thinks he's insane and runs in to get the kids. John follows her, worried that she'll be the next target of the scarecrow, and picks up a weapon. She runs into the house and locks her up with the kids. John, in his desperation, of course, tries to break down the door.
Here's Johnny.
She runs out into the field with John in hot pursuit, when her son decides that he wants to go back for his father and goes to the barn. And inside, he encounters the scarecrow. Finally! Yeah, the ending of this movie is a total anticlimax and does not satisfy on any level. I'm just going to wrap this up as quickly as I possibly can. The kid manages to survive long enough for the family to arrive, but not before the policeman gets it, and the kid runs over the scarecrow with a tractor. How's that for a top-down approach? They then disembowel it and walk off into the sunrise. This movie is disappointing. This horror movie, unlike many others, have likable characters and well-explained character motivations, as well as great actors to portray them. As I said earlier, Norman Reedus really does a good job playing John and really sells his character's transformation throughout the movie. Heather Stevens also does a very good job as Mary, going from an upbeat and happy person to a very sad and angry person later on in the movie. Richard Dreyfuss Jude steals every scene he's in, as he portrays a character that could easily have been a very stereotypical shady person, but instead comes off as a very natural grey character up until the reveal that he's actually a ghost. The problem, and I know it comes as a shock, is that the movie isn't scary. Throughout the entire movie, the only thing we see is cornfields, 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 and a few hallucinations. It gets old really fast. And that's in the end the greatest problem with this movie. A horror movie that isn't scary, or at least so bad it's good, isn't worth watching even with good characters such as these. Not to mention the lame climax. And that's why I'm telling you to skip this movie. It just isn't worth it. Even Prophecy is a better horror movie than this. Anyway, I quite like doing this review thingy, so let's see what other movies I have that I can review. I have this cheesy fancy movie. I have this horror movie set in the Minoan Empire. And I have a Russian fantasy epic. Their answer to Lord of the Rings. I can't say no, can I?